Good afternoon and welcome to Praxis Peace Institute's Friday program. I'm Georgia Kelly, the Director of Praxis. Today we are focusing on a hot topic that some people embrace and others pretend this discussion isn't even happening, which makes it an ideal Praxis topic, and that is the subject of degrowth. Our guest today is Ann Sheridan, and she has worked with San Diego 350, California Doughnut Economic Coalition, Degrowth California, DegrowUS, and the International Degrowth Network to develop strategy, advocate for policy, and build organizational capacity. Her work focuses primarily on cultivating tools and practices for participatory decision-making and conflict transformation. She holds a master's degree in degrowth, ecology, economics, and policy from the Autonomous University of Barcelona in Spain. And I believe this is the only university to offer such a program in the world. So welcome, Ann. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm going to start with, before we get into the weeds of degrowth, I want to begin with having you tell us something about that master's degree program in Barcelona, Spain. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. How did you find out about it, and what did you get from it that has helped you in your degrowth work?
I think I just found out about it through like Twitter, back when Twitter was Twitter. So it was a new program. I was in the first cohort. And yes, as far as I know, it's the only master's program that's actually entirely focused on degrowth. It's very common to have programs. It's growing and growing as an academic discipline, degrowth. And so there's lots of academic programs that are maybe focused on sustainability or political economy that will address it. But yeah, it's pretty like that's the focus is degrowth. And also it's entirely online. So anyone from anywhere in the world can take it, which is really, really neat. I got to meet people from all over the world. And also because of that, then the professors and lecturers are also from all over the world. So you really get exposed to a lot of different, ideas and different aspects of degrowth. Even though degrowth is kind of a niche academic discipline, there's still a lot of richness to it and interdisciplinarity to it. So yeah, it was fun. And I think I forgot your second part of your question.
Well, I was just interested in what you got from it that's been helping you with your work.
Yeah, I think having that very broad aspect of it, there were parts of it that maybe focused on more on the economic piece and the sort of modeling stuff, which is I'm not an economist, so that was new to me. But then there were all other pieces that looked at just the growing degrowth movement and how to sort of affect policy change along degrowth lines. So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It sounds fascinating. And the fact that people can go from all over the world online is wonderful.
Yeah.
It really makes it available for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Now I want to ask you about, give us an overview of degrowth, what it is. I mean, I think a lot of people look at it and think of it as an individual choice about what kind of things they do or don't do in their lives. But it's also, as you're talking about policy, it's a much bigger frame too. So I'd like you to give us maybe an overview of what the policy part of it is, and then separately what the individual part might be.
Mm-hmm. I think even before that, like if I can get a tiny bit of context, it really started as mostly as an academic discipline. It started in people in ecological economics were noticing that we're just on this trajectory, like our societies are just on this trajectory of using more and more resources, and the planet is finite. And so if you're on this trajectory, what happens when you meet up against these planetary boundaries? And so it really started as like, okay, well, how can we sort of stop going in this trajectory, which is really causing a lot of problems, not getting us sort of what we want as a society, as cultures all over the world, and causing a lot of problems. Um, and so looking at that, looking like having this very like sort of holistic lens of looking at um, growth, economic growth as a driver for a lot of the sort of environmental crises and also social crises that we're facing. Um, and then so I think a lot of it is recognizing that and then saying, okay, well, how do we stop this growth machine that's just kind of like it's almost like a runaway train. Um, and so looking at policies that can slow down the train, but also create, there's some theory about, well, we can't really stop it, or there's problems with like there's repercussions for stopping it. And so how do we create I don't really want to say a safety net because that kind of that can be part of the policy package, but just a whole bunch of policies around making sure that we live in a safe environment. We're pushing up all these planetary boundaries. How do we create policies to kind of stop that and make sure we're safe, basically? Um, Again, I think I
I'm glad you
forgot
did
the
that
last top.
because
And
I overlooked that part. So I'm glad you did that. Now I want you to talk about well, first we'll do policies. What are some of the policies that
Mhm,
uh, the organizations you've been involved with are looking at, trying to change, trying to implement?
mhm.
Um,
Oh, so yeah, no, but I will go. Okay, so I'll come to policy, but I did want to say, so there are kind of probably multiple ways to look at degrowth, but one is the actual kind of reduction of this growth trajectory. So the reduction of the amount of resources and energy we are using to produce the economy. That's kind of more the more technical aspect of it. And to do that, not for the fun of it, but to do that in order to stay within planetary boundaries, and also to have economies that are geared to well-being. So, and that's sort of the second aspect of it is a reorientation of our economy. So our economy is really based on profit making and what's gonna give me the most money, right? Because money is what we like use to get all our resources, to feed us and to make our lives well, right? But it doesn't do that. The sort of capitalism doesn't do that in the best way, and it has all these other problems. So it's reorienting the economy to focus more directly on well-being and sort of thinking of it as instead of the economy as like quantifying, like, so we have gross domestic product, GDP, and we say, oh, our economy is doing well because we're increasing the GDP. And it's just a number that kind of keeps going up. And we say, oh, that's really good. And so instead of looking at the economy like a economy that's doing well by using that metric, saying instead of quantity, we want quality. And so what do actually people need? What makes our lives meaningful, worth living? What's important to us? And let's gear the economy to that and address those needs in a more direct way. Um, so so back to policy. So you can imagine there's a whole bunch of policies that can kind of do this in lots of different ways. One are very economic and very abstract. So stop using GDP as the sole measurement of whether we're doing well or not. So some of them are focused on that. Some of them are a whole like slew of them are focused on well, why like I don't know. I kind of call this making work fun again, or maybe I don't know if this is ever fun, but I think before we were so focused on like, oh, we just have to. I have to have a job in order to feed my family. I have to have this work, right? Like, why are we actually producing the things that we are? Is it because it serves a need? Like, so a lot of that is very clear, like care work. If you go and, we want hospitals, we want doctors and things like that. And that's really important for us to have to have a healthy life. But there's a lot of jobs out there, and people doing these jobs know this and talk about this, that they're just like, why am I doing this job? This is not like good for anything. It's maybe even destructive to the environment, destructive to the person's individual health. Um, but they need to do it in order to, have the resources to feed themselves. And so a lot of it focuses on like having, reorienting a production. So product is just an economic term to any like work to things that are that meet human needs in a more direct way. But also like shrinking what so if we did that, that would mean we would work less because we're doing all this stuff that we don't need. And also, again, it's this quantity versus quality thing of like, well, what are the things, in my life that actually make me happy? Is probably not buying a whole bunch of stuff that's like, that either we don't need or is just kind of destroying the environment. And so what if I actually worked less? Like that might actually be better for my mental health, better for my relationships, because I could spend more time with my family. Um, and so like a lot of the policies around shortening the work week, um, yeah, just making like part-time a more viable option. And then a lot of policies also feed into or stem from uh helping like meeting those needs. So universal health care is like a key example. And then also favoring industries that are going to so supporting like public transportation instead of everyone needing their own individual vehicles. So just there's a whole, but I mean, it's like there's so many policies that could
Yeah,
be. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
no,
So
I'm just
jump
curious
in, yeah.
about some of these policies because they feed into a lot of the things we believe in,
Mhm,
and certainly that our members believe in. And it's another question as to how we overcome the way things are set up,
mhm,
which are the opposite. I mean, they're really toward the creating more of a consumer society. I mean, we've already got a consumer society, but it's run rampant at this point. And what do you advise people do on an individual level around degrowth?
Um, I mean, it could be anything from looking at how, what is making your life meaningful, like really asking that question and not taking it at face value that what we've all been taught. And so and it can be simple things like consuming less stuff, buying stuff that's meant to uh, like a higher quality product that's going to last longer. Um, it can be moving toward uh, like working less, but also I think, bringing democracy to your workplace. So unionizing, supporting um, a lot of the, sometimes people think of unions as like, oh, they get together to like raise wages. But a lot of unions are actually doing a lot of work to put in these policies like about quality, right? So teachers will often, as part of their bargaining, will say, hey, we want smaller classroom sizes, which is helping. I mean, it's helping making their job better, but it's also helping the quality of life of their students, right? If they get more individualized attention. Um, so yeah, I mean, degrowth is mainly, and the economy is basically these two aspects, right? Consumption and production. So looking at um, both of these aspects in your life and where you can make improvements. And also, I think just, this transformation requires us to be more politically active as well and engaged. And so anything you can do to like promote democracy and as well as getting involved yourself, but in getting, getting your neighborhood involved. And there's like, there's mutual aid programs that often they crop up in disaster times that we see with like the LA fires and, other when there's hurricanes. And those sort of, it's basically like a way to provide for your community outside of the market and outside of the state in a lot of ways, not relying on,
Yeah,
um,
that's a
yeah.
really interesting point you just brought up about the communities coming together when there's a disaster. I've
Mhm,
certainly experienced that many times because I've lived in places that have had disasters. And people do come together. And the
mhm,
challenge often is then how do you keep what they create as an
yeah.
ongoing movement of some sort or stay
Mhm,
connected? Because often it falls apart after
mhm,
things go back to normal or
mhm,
so-called normal. And I've wondered about that a lot because I've been in those situations where people are all um, psyched, to work together. And then
mhm.
once the problems are solved, it kind of dissipates back into the way
Yeah.
it used to be. I don't know if
Mhm,
there's any solution to that right off, but I think it's worth thinking about. But the
mhm,
other thing you just touched on that I think is important, and it's really hard to get this point across in our society. When you said higher quality products that last longer,
mhm.
we are so programmed to go for the cheapest anything.
Yeah.
And those cheapest anythings are throwaway products for the most
Mhm,
part.
mhm,
Cheap clothes, cheap whatever these cheap things are, they are throwaway and they are
mhm,
thrown away and end up on trash heaps in a very short amount of time. So,
mhm.
do you have any ideas, or does the degrowth movement have any thoughts about how to reorient our thinking around cheap products?
Well, I think before talking about that, like also recognizing the role of industry in that, why are things getting cheaper and cheaper is because there's that there I mean probably heard of planned obsolescence, right? So the quicker a thing runs out, the quicker you're going to buy the new thing, which again, companies are keep wanting you to buy the new thing because they have to grow, they have to like keep making this profit. And so they can't just say, oh, okay, we're going to make this quality thing because I really want people to have this really nice table. And if it lasts like generations, that's amazing. Like I'm proud of the work that I did. I think a lot of us have that in us, but we're like trapped in the system. Um, so I think one can be laws against planned obsolescence, like, or recognizing, there's pros and cons to this policy, but one thing that's floated out there is that you kind of just rent everything. And rent sounds like really unstable, like, oh, I don't want to rent my couch or whatever, because then I don't own anything, and owning feels more secure. But the positive side of that is that you like the company's going to want to make it to build to last because they don't now they're like owning the cost of like what I mean, they're not, if it breaks you don't pay them more money, right? You're paying them the same money, and so now they're the cost of making a new one is on them if you're renting. So I think there's definitely a lot of industry responsibility around that. I'm a big fan of like repair shops and with like repair cafes where the community. I mean, it's even like a great community event where people take their broken, electronics, their clothes to be mended, all kinds of stuff to like a community. It's usually like a fair, like a one-time thing where, and then volunteers will fix it up for you. So
Oh, that's a great idea. I like
yeah,
a volunteer community fair.
yeah,
I've often thought about, and in fact, I had a friend who actually did some of this. I don't know how successful it was, but the idea of renting tools rather than everyone
right, yeah,
having their own set of tools,
yeah,
renting things that you may only use a couple of times a year,
yeah,
so you don't need to own it. And
yeah.
That like there could be a neighborhood, they have these neighborhood libraries. People can bring books and take books, and it just goes
Yeah.
on like that. But a neighborhood tool center where everyone
Yeah.
in a certain range of blocks can rent things from that tool center would be so much more helpful
Yeah.
in terms of not having to buy things we don't need.
Yeah.
There's so much more duplication than
Hmm.
we need as a society. And part of us being created into our little individual habitats is so that we think we need all this stuff to own.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's, I think, a really important difference that you're making on that too. We're also dealing with this American addiction to this way of life of consumption. We're dying of consumption. But
Yeah.
I want you to tell us a little bit about how we might get involved, what the degrowth movement in California is doing, and how we might be involved in it if we would like, and also on the national level, because we have some people who are going to listen to this who are not in California.
Hmm. I think so. Degrowth California is a small group of people, and our focus is mainly education right now. And so, to talk to different groups, like I did one for San Diego 350, a presentation. There's presentations to other like at local democratic groups. Um, so a lot of people, they've either have never heard of this, or they have a lot of questions about it, because it's just like, wait, they can't imagine like an economy that doesn't grow. Like, why are you against growth, right? So that's really our main focus in California. And similarly in the US, I think there's obviously a lot more degrowth groups. And so at the national level, a lot of the work is just around coordinating and like seeing what other groups are doing. But yeah, again, it's about like mostly education. There's a new Degrowth Institute that started like within the last year out of Purdue University, and they're putting on a summer school or a conference in Chicago this year. And so there have been other degrowth conferences in Europe. They're kind of ahead of us in degrowth, but it's nice to see that other things are happening in the US.
Is England one of the primary places where there is more going on action-wise?
Yeah, I think Europe in general and maybe more on the continent. But yes, I think, Europe and the UK are
A little bit ahead of us.
yeah, yeah.
Do you think it's a harder sell here?
Um, that that's usually the consensus that the US, so I mean, you can kind of see this in debates about universal health care, right? Which is a key part of degrowth, right? And so Europe, they already have it. And everybody is, once you experience it, you're like, this is the greatest thing. Like, I can go to the hospital and I never have to worry about if I'm going to go bankrupt, or like, should I call? No, don't call the ambulance because it's going to cost me money. Like, nobody is saying that, right? And so, um, but here it's just, I mean, for whatever reason or multiple reasons, it's just has been a harder sell here. Just that aspect of it. So for those same reasons, um, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's our individualism in
Yeah.
America. I don't, or maybe we're just like super capitalism. I think a lot of the neoclassical economic theory really took hold in the US in a way it didn't take hold in. I mean, there's plenty of that over there too, but
Not like here.
yeah, I think it's hard to, but we definitely get that vibe, right? That it's a harder sell here. So
Yeah, I think that's true. I want to allow other people who might want to ask questions who are on the call to have a chance to do that also. So I'm going to be looking and seeing if I see your hands up, if anyone wants to ask anything. Um, if not, we'll go back to discussing some more of this. I've got some other things I'd like to talk about. And oh, I see. Okay, Jerry, you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this topic. I'm currently preparing a presentation for an environmental law conference called Climate Change and Economic Growth.
Mhm.
Um,
Lovely.
and I think one of the key elements, and you began to talk about it, Anne, is a larger public sector.
Mhm.
Obviously, and that's where the public transit and public health and all that come in. Um, and of course, there is a lot of inertia in the other direction here in the United States. So, I mean, it sounds like the movement you're involved in is in a kind of nascent stage. I don't know if it's really beginning to deal with issues like, more public, uh, a stronger public sector and redistribution of wealth and all those elements that are obviously key to any real hope of moving in that direction, as far as I understand it.
Mhm. Um, well, I think that it's funny. So degrowth is definitely in a nascent. It is nascent as an idea, as a movement, but it really builds upon so much that has been around for many, many years, right? So universal health, like degrowth did not invent universal healthcare, right? Like a lot of this, if you're talking about expanding the like public sector, that's like, FDR, the New Deal, like this has been and which is currently being eroded, and that's a problem and needs to be expanded. But I think just kind of focusing on, and this maybe addresses like how to get involved. Like there have been loads and loads of movements that, you know, if you're gonna start a tool library, to me, that's doing degrowth, right? If you're going to, advocate for public transportation, that's doing degrowth, right? So, um, yeah, I think that the new part is like putting the economic theory on it and really pushing against classical or neoliberal economic theory.
Mhm.
Like that's like more new. But yeah, all of this stuff has been around for a long time.
That's it's really about, I think educating is difficult in the kind of environment we're in, but it's also difficult under the administration we've got right now. I mean, we've got 4 years of this pushing everything that's profit making.
Yeah.
Moira, I see her hand is up. Go ahead, Moira. You may be mute. I'm just looking to see.
Okay.
There you go.
Firstly, I'm just so thrilled to find out I'm not the only crazy person in the world. And, but one of many things that Anne has provoked. I saw a lecture with William McDonough at Davis he was a visitor in the early 90s. And one of the things he emphasized was the concept of away. We throw things away. We do this, throw it away, do this away. And if only we could find a way as humans to be responsible for a way, besides feeding it to whales. And we all know all the consequences of that. So, it drives me crazy. But if there were a way to do that, I mean, we have an economy that was based on money, and that's arbitrary. In fact, it's not natural capitalism. So I think I should stop talking before I talk all day.
Any comments before we go on, Anne?
No, I mean, but yes, that's a key point is that one of the ways we're kind of exceeding these planetary boundaries is just where we're just producing all this like waste and we don't know how to deal with it, right? And we like all the plastic waste in the ocean and our food and our bodies, like this is a problem that capitalism or the sort of the growth mindset is causing that we have to find a way to deal with.
It seems like the challenge, other than going to the moon and all that. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
One of the people that I interviewed a while back, Peter Goodman, I think his name was, and he wrote a book about the transportation sector in the world, the massive shipping of goods that nobody really needs, you know, the tchotchkes that end up in souvenir shops, and just a lot of junk that gets shipped all over the world in these huge containers. And of course, the labor problems with that. I mean, what they've done to people who, I mean, it's shocking actually, which I had never heard about before I interviewed him. But then you become aware of there's all this shipping going on that we never even hear about, we don't know about. And it's for things that is the throwaway culture. So I see Linda's got her hand up, so I'm going to go to her. Linda.
Actually, it's Rocky. Go ahead.
Okay, Rocky, go ahead.
Yes, and I'm very impressed with the point that you bring forth. That you have a lot of opposition. You are walking headlong into the wind of capitalism. You didn't start out at this point. How did you get here?
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, I think I've been critical of capitalism for a long time. I think because to me, it's like I think like it's a maybe it was just like my family's values of like, money does not buy happiness. And so if you're both of my parents were in like, one was a teacher, one worked in mental health, like just very which aren't known for like making lots of money. So I think it just kind of start like that kernel of like a life that's well lived is not one where you accumulate a lot of stuff. And I think that yeah, there's just we know there's a lot of religions and spiritual practices that value like again the quality of our lives rather than like the quantity of like how much we have. And I think that's that was like the kernel that just kind of snowballed. And the more I read, and I think how I got into degrowth specifically was being very concerned about climate change and seeing that just reading enough that we can't really do something about that unless we address economic issues. That economic issues are really driving like the model of economy that we have is causing problems.
You bring up something about the economy being the problem, and we started out as a peace organization, and it wasn't long before we realized that you can't get peace if you don't deal with the economic system, because we have an economic system that's pretty much a war economy. And to get to peace, you've got to really dismantle that war economy. So it's the same economy that you're talking about that's blocking all of the better ways of living.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately what we're up against is how do we transform that economy? I mean, anyone who's got any ideas on this, this is something we're going to look at the conference as well, but it's a critical piece. This is what's stopping us on almost every level.
I think the military is an interesting example too, because it's a way to illustrate that if you produce something, it's going to be used. So if you're making the tanks and the military equipment, it's going to be used somewhere. Like they're not going to just doesn't. I mean, maybe there's examples of it sitting on the shelf somewhere, but it's just it's. I think people think like, oh, we make this stuff because people want it. And it's almost the opposite. It's like we make this stuff, we put it out there, and then like we have to sell it. So then we advertise it. And then we're like, oh, okay, of course the way to deal with this conflict is more military, military aid. Like that's the kind of aid we give, right? I mean, I think, we give other kinds of aid, but
It's primarily.
Yeah. I think
That's a good point. Any other questions or comments on degrowth? Yeah, Rocky?
Go ahead.
At present time, any heroes that really motivated you on this path or got you started?
I think most of my teachers there were some really good teachers. I think the first sort of book I read was Kate Raworth's Doughnut Economics. And I think she did a really good job. I was like, oh, economics is about math. I don't really care about, I didn't really want to delve too much into it. But she really, two things with that book. One was really made the point and made it accessible that all of us can access an understanding of the economy. Like it is made, I think it's sort of made on purpose to be obscure and to be complicated. Say, oh, it's really complicated. Like let some other people deal with the economy and like figure out whether we should do X, Y, and Z. And I think we can see that there's a huge level of economic illiteracy in this country where people like, oh, tariffs? I didn't know tariffs were going to increase prices, where this is like a basic economic 101 kind of thing. So by getting back to that, so that book really made me feel like I could learn about economics and that was important. And she also, again, building on lots of other people's work, but came up. So I don't know if people have seen the donut, but it's this idea that we can live. So the economy has to put us in a safe space, right? A safe and just space. And this is the space where we're not violating ecological boundaries. So these are boundaries that scientists from all over the globe have said, okay, well, we have too much carbon in the atmosphere. That's one boundary. We're losing biodiversity too fast, like too many extinctions too quickly. That's another boundary we're crossing. So we want an economy that doesn't do all those bad things, but also make sure that we that we meet human needs, right? So the inner side of the donut is okay, do people have enough to eat? Do they have shelter? But do they also have like quality of life where they have meaningful work? Do they have political voice? Is there equality in the culture between groups of people? And so that concept that the economy is supposed to, like, there's a space between these things was, I think, very
yeah, it's very useful. We read her
Yeah.
book in the book club also
Okay.
a few years ago. So, yeah, and I do think it's a very good model that she created. It's very visual. You can see exactly where the boundaries are.
I'll say that I also like Jason Hickel's. I mean, I could name a
yes,
bazillion
Jason
people, but I
Hickel.
like his work. Less is more is very accessible, talks a lot about policy, so it's very simple to read. And he really focuses, he came from a development background and really focuses on unequal exchange between the global north and the global south, and makes this very strong and powerful argument that the global south is really supporting us. We think, oh, we send aid to the global south, and so the US is like supporting, like that's the narrative, especially Trump, like, oh, we're supporting everybody in the world, and it's really the global south that's supporting our lifestyles. So I think that was, but
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just putting that information in the chat box. I think Jerry has his hand up.
Ben hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah.
Well, I would, at this point, the prospect of degrowth doesn't seem that sort of top of my mind, because there's certainly nothing that's going to be happening on a national or international level that's going to move the ball in terms of no climate objectives will be met. The current policy of America is drill, baby, drill. They're committed to get the last drop of oil out of the earth and sell it. So that's not changing. And none of our plans are going to be relevant until we address the problem of political power. And I think your guest here has, pointed to that, but it's sort of a sine qua non. If that doesn't happen, all of these grand designs to, remake the earth are going to be impossible. So I would just like to, maybe I'm a little black-pilled about this. And I would like your guest to, how does she suggest that we address dealing with this at this point? The fact that there will be no legislative or political progress for sure, at least for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
That's my
Maybe
question.
two, possibly two.
Yeah. It's bleak. I think I mean, lots of people have lots of suggestions, right, around this. One is to focus at the state level, and I think we have a good leverage point with California being such a huge economy, with Gavin Newsom clearly not loving the Trump agenda. So that's one thing. One is some of these things are outside the state, right? Like what did you say? Like a tool library, like things like that are but it's really going to take all of this stuff, and then yeah, I don't know, maybe just reforming the Democratic Party really push like, hey, universal healthcare is actually a really popular platform, like push that. And but I don't know. I mean, if I knew how the Democratic Party could have won the election, I wouldn't have kept it to myself. So I don't know.
Yeah, they shot themselves in the foot. I want to go to Jerry, and then I have something I want to bring up too. So go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, uh, the inertia behind the status quo and what Ben's saying, I mean, that's the big challenge. Um, in this presentation that I'm preparing, I'm working with Aviva Chomsky. Have you read her book, Anne?
No.
She wrote a book called Is Science Enough? That deals with the need to uh, reduce our overall demand for energy as fundamental to dealing with the climate crisis. And she also deals with the notion of planetary boundaries. And she's Noam Chomsky's daughter. She's got his smarts. It's a great book. So I would recommend that. Um, you know, I'm putting an enormous amount of time into preparing for this panel that I'm going to be giving in March at this environmental law conference. And I think to try and talk to Ben's point, we're getting to the critical juncture. I mean, where the extreme events are getting so bad that I think that might just push us in some kind of a different direction. Anyway, I think it's a time to try and do whatever we can. And there's certainly no clear answer to what's going to work. So I'm just doing my best to promote the discussion about degrowth in the context of environmental law. And everybody has to do what they can.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole science and study around the theories of change, right? And I think there's so that's a whole discussion about, how to change anything, right? And I think one of the, what I really like is a theory, I think developed, I think she borrowed it from somewhere else, but Joanna Macy, if people are familiar
Yeah,
with this.
we know her.
So her like holding actions, right? And then prefigurative, sort of creating the new, and then sort of, cultural transformation. And I think, no, we're not going to be able to do it all, or one person's not going to be able to do it all, but just kind of pick the one that speaks to you, or what, or the combination that speaks to you, and just keep at it. Yeah.
One of the biggest barriers that I run into is I'm a member of the State Sierra Club Committee on Climate and Energy, and I try to bring up the degrowth perspective, and most of them just don't want to hear it.
Mm.
And these are dedicated people, very
Yeah.
smart with strong technical backgrounds, but they're trying to interact with people in power, with regulators and legislators. And I think they're afraid of becoming marginalized if they start talking about, moving away from economic growth.
Yeah.
Well, I fully believe that a degrowth transition can come about and you don't never have to really talk about it, and just put like just say, hey, we just want an economy that is like actually doing, like making our lives better. Like, and so I think, if they're talking to regulators, they're going to talk about like, well, like how do we stop? Those are the holding actions. Like, how do we stop the bad stuff from happening? Or, maybe there's, if there all this, stuff with like sorry, it's SDG&E here down, but these big investor-owned utilities, if that's like the thing that's like getting you, like keeping you awake at night, then it's like, okay, well, we're just gonna try to have community power in our neighborhood. And that's a community run way to provide energy to our community. So that's totally degrowth, and people can just, I don't think you have to talk about, like, I guess I would be interested, and maybe some other time, like to have a conversation about why. I think the biggest resistance to degrowth is not even the concept, it's the idea and it's the messaging. And people are like, oh no, you talk about degrowth and people, it's like, okay, well, don't
I
talk
think there's a
about
lot
it.
yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah,
I mean, economic growth is the closest thing we have to a state religion.
yeah. And I talk about it because I think it is useful as a frame to tie all these things together to say, workers being in charge of their workplace, worker-owned cooperatives, that is a policy that will help with climate change. Like, so I think it is definitely useful, but yeah, it doesn't, yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
That's why we've been going to Mondragon, Spain so many times. They're
Yeah.
models, not only of the worker-owned cooperatives, but also the culture, the socially transforming of evolution that is always going on. I've been going there since 2008, and to see the difference in this short amount of time, 2008 to 2024, is extraordinary. I mean, the things that have happened there because the society is evolving.
Mhm.
It's not static. And to see a model like that, to me, is just really exciting. I don't see it here, and I don't see it in a lot of places, but they have incorporated and continue, like they never think they're finished. They're always working on improving the way they live, and they are always improving it. So it's extraordinary. One of the things I wanted to get back to, I like leaving on a note like that, but I have to get back to one other thing that is not so good, but it's the way a lot of Americans are hostage in our economic system, and that is debt.
Mhm.
Debt is holding people hostage. We have
Yeah.
medical debt, which is
Yeah.
huge. Um, Mortgages that, I don't know, interest rates change. People don't have the same money they had when they got the house or whatever. But
Mhm.
debt is a huge piece of why people don't do anything, I think.
Mhm. Mhm.
And how to get past that one. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
just
think,
think we have to take that on, and I don't see anyone taking it on.
yeah, it's I think it's certainly more complicated for me to understand, like the role of how finance is perpetuating this growth, but it absolutely is, and people are looking at that. And I think yeah, just looking at how like money is like banks just loaning money is like
Creating it
creating
out of
money.
nothing.
Yeah, creating it out of nothing, perpetuating this like growth, um, and how to like sort of rein that in. But yeah, there doesn't like I don't yeah the debt. I mean, I think
The
like
problem.
clearing a lot of debt um is also a key degrowth policy.
And on a national level, or in an international level, a book that I would recommend, it's really interesting, is called Adults in the Room by Yanis Varoufakis.
Oh yeah.
It is an incredible book because he just goes through all the machinations he had to go through as Greece's finance minister, dealing with the Economic Union, dealing with the European
Yeah.
Central Bank and the
Yeah.
IMF.
Yeah.
Startling information on how some of them know that austerity is a terrible idea, but
Yeah.
they're not going to buck the system. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
mind-boggling to read that. It's a real wake-up call. I'm going to put that in the chat box too. Okay, let's go to Ned, because Ned hasn't had a chance to ask. Go ahead, Ned.
Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize, I missed the first part of this, but I just want to underline, and I'm so delighted with the things you're focusing on, because they aren't being dealt with very much. Although Matis Walker-Nagel got me started with his his global footprint thing. And then, and now we see the donut economics that you mentioned. So it's so important. And I worked in climate, but I noticed most people working in climate in this area are only touching on a few aspects and not looking at the whole picture. Because we're destroying the earth is what's going on. And most of life on earth is under heavy danger of being extinguished. And so it's such a huge, a massively important thing. And I thank Jerry for working on this thing with his economic law people. But at any rate, I just stop with that. I'm just really proud of what you're doing. And we need more emphasis on, raising that up to a point where we can actually get into the conversation usefully. So we can figure out how to make massive changes. We have to make a U-turn, and it's pretty scary, but you give me hope. Thank you.
I'm thinking at the end of this, just hearing what you said, Ned, that at the end of that, we have these 6 different programs on the environment and dealing with the environment. Kim Stanley Robinson is part of the 6 programs, you are, Anne, and Richard Heinberg in March, and Osprey Oriole Lake in April. So we have a group of 6. And at the end of it, I think I will, since we're recording everything, is to put this information together and maybe have a couple of hours where a lot of us can talk together about it and decide what we might want to do and what we might want to plug into. So that's something that would happen in probably June. But anyway, it's a thought. So I'm going to, let's see. Okay, Ben's next, and then Moira, and then we'll probably have to finish.
Okay, well, I'll be quick here. I didn't want to leave this meeting with a downer vibe here. I am, I've been grappling with the implications of this election, and it's made me more committed than ever to recognizing that we need a strong progressive movement that has social democratic economics. Wolf and his, Broad, his partner in Democracy at Work, talk about a hub and spoke arrangement. But the direct way to get this in our political system, our range of action now is not on a national level for sure, for the next couple of years at least, but it is to work to elect about 40 progressive Democrats, so that you have a caucus. And the progressive caucus is going to have to be purged, because it's going to have to be based on, do you agree with the Bernie's top 5 agenda, Medicare for all, national jobs program, et cetera? If you don't agree with that, then you're not in the club. If the leader of the caucus says this vote is critical to our mission, you will vote against the bill and you will force them to put it back and rewrite it. But you have to have a caucus big enough. That's when the Democratic establishment, the centrists, will start respecting you, is when we can stop the action. Until then, we're just talk. So that's the immediate game plan for me. Is I'm not here to persuade the centrist Democrats. I'm here to replace them. So whenever you have a blue district, and the action should be in blue districts, if it's going to be a Democrat, there's no problem with running a progressive against them. If you're out in the middle of nowhere where no one has ever seen a Democrat, it doesn't cost you anything to say, I'm going to be a candidate and I'm going to get on a stage and talk this talk. This is what Democrats say. They have nothing to say about it because you're the guy who took the mantle. So my more upbeat assessment.
Well, that's what AOC did. She just ran against an incumbent Democrat who was a centrist and won. So Moira, let's finish with you. Moira, where did she go?
She failed to unmute.
Okay.
So without going into all the reasons, I've long been concerned with how do we educate people? I mean, we do have strong Democrats that do all kinds of things, but the people who elected the people who are deciding how our climate should be or suffer, they don't seem to be educated. And one of the concepts that in agriculture always came forward was Maslow's hierarchy, where the basic needs of people are air and water. If you don't have those two things, none of the rest of the discussion is meaningful. And after that, food and shelter, which in time are equally critical. So that concept doesn't seem to be in the room. And it bothers me. I think it's necessary for humans to accept it.
Yeah, it's interesting that at Mondragon, they used to teach us about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I thought, oh, we've already heard this. But a lot of people in America haven't.
No.
But they were onto it. You have to satisfy a certain threshold of a person's life before they're going to care about politics or they're going to care about getting involved on that level. Otherwise, they're just trying to exist. So I think that's an important point. Anne, do you have anything you want to close with to tell us, or?
I actually like that you brought up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because there's actually a lot of theories around needs, and degrowth is often called a needs-based economy. And so to really, just to center the fact that like this is really about meeting people's needs, making the quality of people's lives better. Good. Yeah. Yes. And making, that's a key piece to that it's going to be equitable.
Yeah.
Gotta.
This has been a good discussion. I want to thank you, Anne, because I think, it's a discussion we've never really had. And of course, it's definitely important with looking at the environmental movement from here, where we go and how we get things done. And I think a lot of good ideas came forth in our discussion today. So I really appreciate you being with us. And all of you will get the link tonight to the YouTube video. So you can, like Ned, you can watch the beginning of it that you missed, and everyone can see it again. So I want to thank you all, and thank you, Anne, for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's fun.
Okay, good. I think people are clapping. They're muted, but they're clapping.
Yeah.
So, okay. I don't know. Does anyone want to hang out for a little while? And don't feel like you have to stay. It's just totally up to you. We usually have this water cooler time where people hang out for a few minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
They won't. If they don't, we'll go. No.
Oh, yes, Anne, you have a lot of energy, just simply as a person, but I mean, you have a lot of energy for a tough issue. Who nourishes you on a more daily basis to keep where you're at?
I love you bringing these personal questions, because it's so to me it's all about like building relationships. Like these are the things that like this does nourish me, right? Like for someone to say, hey, I care about you and how you're, how you do this. My family, I guess. I don't know. I just I mean, I have my days that are, it's a tough time right now to look at not just the administration and what's going to happen, but also, I think a lot of people are like, well, I can't believe my neighbors are okay with, voted in the way they did. And that's like the opposite of your question. So I don't know. It's
Well, you seem like you have a good outlook, and that you are taken care of and you take care of yourself. And that's good, because we need to do that for the kind of work we're up against.
Yeah.
I just don't, I only read headlines right now, because that tells me everything I need to know. I don't need to read the nonsense. And I look at Common Dreams, which I think is really good, but it gets depressing at times. So, I think we have to take care of ourselves to be able to be effective,
Mhm.
which is good. And we're all going to do that.
Yeah.
We have a good community of people who do that.
Yeah, that's really sweet. Yeah, I think
So,
that, we're a cooperative species that like really thrives on each other. Like, I mean, there's conflict, but really our relationships with people is what makes life worth living, I think. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well put.
Yeah.
We didn't stop the recording.